Rick,
I like your outfit today, man. You got it looks like a beanie, but I know it's your Tennessee Volunteer. Yep, that's it. Your catcher's cap.
that's right.
When I was a kid, nobody wore them that way. This is like, it's kind of odd to see grown men going around with little
Yeah,
league backwards.
yeah. It's my catcher said I'm catching ego. Trying to catch ego. It's hard, man. It's a full-time job.
Full time job.
Yeah, man. I thought one of my colleagues at work wanted to do a couple of podcasts on a few subjects. I thought we'd do the first one, and this is about self-acceptance. So why don't you start that off, man? How did you come to self-acceptance, or how do you work on it?
Well, I think the first thing is that we have to acknowledge that we have a story. We always tell ourselves the same story over and over and over. I'm this or I'm that, or I can't do this because of that, or my mother was this way, and that's because and I'm this way because that's because how she was. There's this whole narrative that we have. So the first step, I think, is in recognizing what your narrative is. If you have limitations in life, they're going to be self-imposed. You're looking through a lens that you've created over the history of your life, which is probably wrong. It's probably wrong. But the problem is you continue to see the same thing over and over until you get out of yourself. And the way you get out of yourself is through a lot of different ways. For me, it was through meditation. It was through reading people who had been through transformations, that the same kind of, and one of the same kinds of things that I did. And it was also a lot to do with recognizing that there were many, many things in the world that were going to come at me that I could not control. And my old way was to constantly try to limit those circumstances, get away from this, get away from that, and then have peace. That's not the way it works. The way it works is your attitude toward whatever happens to you is the only thing that really matters, because the circumstances are always going to be different. They're always going to be coming at you. And you're always, always left with the choice of how you want to deal with them. And once you give yourself permission and you self-accept that permission to deal with it in a way that makes sense for you, things start to open up for you. So I would say keep in mind, keep your eye on what your narrative is, and realize that it's probably wrong or mostly an illusion. And then secondly, give yourself permission to step outside of that and to see something completely different and choose a different kind of reaction to whatever your circumstances, and accept yourself for doing that. I'm going to say no this time. She keeps asking for a ride. I'm not doing it. Good.
Right. Yeah, man. Thank you for that. For me, it became being courageous enough to be vulnerable. To take my mask off.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of my childhood doing well in school and not feeling like I had anything to be ashamed of or to be embarrassed by, and I was never made to feel like I wasn't good enough. I grew up around family members who all made me, especially my mom's side. They just always lifted me up, man. And they told me I could do anything. And so I grew up in that environment. The first shock I got was when I went to school and I was 14, and this student, this classmate who I'd never met before, made a comment about my lips. And I never really noticed that I had thick lips. It was never a problem. And she made, through that whole Spanish class, that whole semester, she would just sit behind me in class and just comment on how thick and big my lips were. Yes. And in that moment, I said, there's something wrong with me. Yeah. So the denial about myself started then, and I started to cover up. And so if you look at pictures, and I told this story before, if you look at pictures of me from age 14 to 37, all my pictures are like this.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So, and you never see me smile. And my story was that I don't have a nice smile. Mm-hmm. So I never smiled. And so when I would be talking to people, they would be having a conversation, and I may have caught every third word because I'm so conscious of like, how do my lips look? What are they seeing? What are they thinking? And that's a tough place to be, man. And I wasn't present. I was so preoccupied with that. And I would sit in the mirror, man. I would sit in the mirror for minutes every morning for years, practicing meeting somebody for the first time and saying, hi, my name is Keith, and positioning my lips in a way as I said it, like, hi, my name is Keith, in a way to where the thickness of my lips wouldn't come through. I mean, so there was so much shame over that. And I carried that for a long time, and that created this added pressure to be perfect or to look perfect. And it didn't stop there. I grew up in a really rough childhood, and with my stepfather. My mom was fantastic. My stepfather had his own challenges with drinking, so it was an abusive childhood. And I remember trying to hide that side of how I grew up, and it showed up in a lot of different ways later in my life. But I had to be successful, not because I wanted to be successful, but because I had to put on this mask, this projection to the world that I was successful, and I didn't come from this very abusive background in childhood. And so I hid that. And one time, my sister, half sister, who didn't live with me, she heard about the kind of childhood that I had, and so I created this life out here in Scottsdale, Arizona, with a house, across the street from the golf course in this gated community, and the luxury car. And, family was super proud of me and my accomplishments. And my sister, who I didn't grow up with, but knew again about the abuse that we suffered in my childhood, my brother and I, she came out and introduced me and I introduced her to my friends, who only knew this projection, this Keith that I wanted them to see. And these friends were shocked, when my sister said, "Oh, Keith grew up in this abusive household. His father was an alcoholic and he used to beat him." I remember sitting at the table, Rick, just mortified.
Build the beans.
And I denied, and I denied, and I denied. And I was so angry with her because she was knocking down this wall that I put up, this projection. And we had so many plans. This is our first time traveling out here to the West Coast. And we're going to go to Vegas for a couple of days. We're going to go to the Grand Canyon. I canceled all those plans and said I had to work because I was so upset with her.
Wow.
I doubled down on it. I mean, and that was an example of I didn't accept myself.
Yeah.
And it would be many years later, in 2007 was really when I started to accept myself. I went to this seminar, and I really became really clear on how I put these walls up to protect myself, but what they really were they were imprisoning me. I couldn't be my full self, and I wasn't present to people. There was a barrier between us, and it was one that I had erected. And so when I met you and some of our other friends, and we started doing some of these workshops, I started to become aware of sharing things. And although this wasn't exactly the healthiest way to do it, I would share little things, and you all wouldn't react with judgment. You reacted with love. It wasn't pity. It was just love and compassion. It's like you were able to identify the humanity in my story and with me, and connect on that level. And then you shared and offered things that were also incredibly vulnerable. And that became my gateway to acceptance. And then I graduated from there to where I could share with people about my story because it had no hold on me anymore. And it was not dependent on whether the other person was vulnerable, knew how to be vulnerable, valued vulnerability. It didn't matter. I was just being real with who I am. People, for the longest time, as I drove a Prius for a number of years, man, and that car had been through it. It had scratches on it, and but I said I was going to be the last owner, and I was, and that car looked like it, but it served me well. But I remember going to places and driving up in my car and parking in the front row, like my car, hey, throw the keys to the valet, hey, take care of it. And just years before that, before 2007, when in early 2000s, I went through a financial challenge, hardship. And so I had to sell the luxury car, and I had to not downgrade because there's no downgrade, but I got another car that wasn't luxury. And I remember the shame of that because I felt like I'd fallen somewhere. There's no place to fall. And I would go to the gym, and I would park a mile away so nobody could see me get out of this used car and walk to the gym. I mean, the vanity. You would if you'd asked me if I was vain, I would have said no. But you look at my behavior, it told you everything you needed to know. Or you would ask me, do I care what people think? No, I don't care what people think. Oh, just look at my behavior. And all I did was care about what people thought. And there was no acceptance. And then one time after 2000, my mom came out here and she noticed the car and she noticed that I wasn't taking care of it. It wasn't clean. It wasn't vacuumed inside. And she said, Keith, you got to be grateful for what you have, before you can have or appreciate anything else. And she was so right. And it would be a couple more years before I really started to take that wisdom and apply it to my entire life. But I did. I started to apply it to my entire life. And it was liberating, man. And it all really started with self-acceptance, man. Like I had a stuttering problem when I was from age like 5 to 17. And so that was another thing that I had tremendous shame over. Now stutter and trip over a word is cool. I make a mistake, it's cool. People see that I'm not cool, that's cool too. I mean, just everything, man, because I've learned to accept myself. And when I say accept myself, what I've learned to be is just be aligned with trying to be conscious, trying to be kind. And that's it. And now that I've given up judging myself, guess what has also happened? I judge other people less too.
Yeah, that's
how that works.
Good start. That's
Tell me
right.
how that works. When I was at the height of judging others, it's because I was judging myself. I was so critical of myself. And it masked itself in several ways. Instead of being really clear, really aware that I was judging myself, the way that it happened was I was making other people wrong based on their behavior because it wasn't what I thought they should be doing, which meant that it's not what I would do because I'm trying to put up this facade, And so, but when I gave all that up, man, and started to become really vulnerable, it changed everything. Like I give these talks, wellness talks, and a lot of it is just being authentic and being vulnerable throughout the whole thing. And I think that is
that's right.
Connecting with. I've been asked, like, man, Keith, how could you possibly share that, man? That's refreshing. Like, I just want to have an honest talk. Can we have an honest talk? And so in conversation, so we can really grow. And as you mentioned, man, if we can cut through the small talk and just really get to it, man, like let's not waste any more time. Let's just be real with each other. So that's been key for me with self-acceptance. It's being vulnerable.
Yeah, I agree with you. Someone once said, I can't remember who it was, but this helped me a lot in my career as a trial lawyer. And that was, when you talk, people just want to know if you're an honest person. You don't have to have it perfect. You don't have to master the teleprompter or master your index cards or whatever crutches you're using to talk. If you could throw all that crap away and just talk from the heart, you'll sound like a fool to yourself, but you'll make sense to other people. Because we have this expectation of perfection. And here's the rule. Perfectionism is the oppressor. Perfectionism is the oppressor. You got to get away from that. The thing that is very important for people to realize, and took me forever to get this down, and that is that everybody starts out with the idea that they have this secret about how terrible that they are on some level. And if people would only find out, they would be friendless and wouldn't fit in the community. We all have this idea that we're frauds in some way. All of us. I mean, we have that imposter syndrome built into us, I think. And it's really helpful, if you can accept that other people have it, because it will allow you to look at yourself and accept that as well. So when you're talking about giving talks and people are so refreshed to hear you tell a story that is self-deprecating, it's because that frees up them the opportunity to tell their self-deprecating story. And we all have them. Everybody is defective. Everybody is imperfect in some way. And so, the funny thing is, it's the irony of society, but the irony of society is we don't recognize imperfection. If you are imperfect, your first obligation is to cover it up.
Right.
And if you can't cover it up, then what we want you to do is to pretend that it's cured. You can talk about it, but you got to claim that you've cured it. Okay, if you can't claim that you cured it, then the next thing you got to do is just don't show up to the party. Just don't be around other decent people. And then society says, if you can't do any of those things, then at least when you show up, feel ashamed.
Right.
I mean, that's how the culture works, right? I don't care if it's American or if it's Hindi. I mean, the idea is that's kind of human nature. You start off with the idea that there's this perfection, and it's a bunch of hogwash. So the sooner you can get to the idea that you are imperfect and so is everybody else, and that's just the way nature is, and live your life, man, self-acceptance frees up a lot of space in your life, frees up a lot of room that's now being occupied by a lot of bandwidth that you don't need, that's causing you hurt and suffering.
Yeah, you're so right. I was talking to our mutual friend Brian, and he's heard about some of the talks I've done, and he's like, man, it's just amazing that you can inject humor in there and it's deprecating. And I'm like, Brian, like, I'm not setting out to be funny or self-deprecating. I'm just being open and vulnerable. And the behavior, you're looking at it when you're not judging it, it's just funny. Like, who walks around and does this?
That's right.
That's really what it's none of that. Like, I'm like, oh, self-deprecating humor is the access to getting people to build rapport. That's not what I'm setting out to do. I'm looking back at the behavior and it's like, who lives in a place for 30 years and complains about the heat every single day is if it's a difference on the heat? A crazy person. That's who does it. It's not self-deprecating. It's just like, it's comical, that somebody would do something like that and be that inefficient with their time and energy. But I was, and my life is filled with that. I mean, who walks around from something is said at age 14, and for the next 23 years, they never smile in a photo? Who does that? Somebody who has no self-acceptance.
Yeah.
I mean, and I go back to that person, when I was having that experience, man, and I just have compassion and empathy, man. And I've just made a choice that this thing, man, is going in a heartbeat. This in this physical form is done. It's gone. And I'm not spending another day like that.
That's right.
Like, I just made a choice. Like, hey, and if people, the vulnerability is unsettling for them, or they think it's misplaced, or there's an appropriate place for this, that's your path.
Blah blah blah.
That's your path, and that's cool. I'm not judging your path. This is mine. And what I found, man, with self-acceptance comes inner peace, and it's liberating, Rick. Not to do that every day, man.
Right.
Dude, how much time have I gotten back in my morning when I'm not doing this with my lips? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, obsessing about what I'm going to wear so that other people, think I have style or whatever else. I mean, I give it attention, but I'm not spending a ton of time.
You're not run by it. It's not running you. Like your lips were running you for a long time.
Oh, my looks were running me, man. The presentation, I can't say how many times did I did? Dude, spending like forever on a slide presentation to get the font just right. I'm gonna go through it, do a couple passes. Okay, I'm selling on a font. Let's put a time limit on this. Okay, you got a minute and a half to pick the right font. Whatever you end up with, okay, Gothic. We're going with Gothic. That's it. And I'm moving on, man. That's too much time, dude.
That's right.
Too much time. And so self-acceptance has really, it's been key to me, man. And in doing so, I've accepted others for who they are and who they're not.
That's terrific, Keith. Good for you. That's really wonderfully put. I love that story, and I love all of the things that you remind us all of, that we have imperfections and things that we are embarrassed about, and we always will. That's part of the human condition. It's just nothing around it that you can change without accepting first. You have to accept it before you can actually realize it's the change, and then the space opens up for you accepting other things in your life as well. One thing that helped me too was after I started the practice, I was less full of myself, and so it became helpful to remind myself that no matter what I did, no matter how extreme or how goofy or how foolish or how criminal or whatever it is, whatever label you want to put on it, I'd never be more than just a footnote in somebody's dinner table conversation.
If
You know,
that.
we're the stars in our own show, right? So
Right.
for me, it's huge, but for you, it's like, oh, that goofy Rick. Did you just hear that? And then pass the potatoes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, man. Rick, I love you, man.
I love you. See you later today, man.
I'll see you later today.
Okay, cool.
Adios.
Bye bye.